The sun had just begun its slow climb over the rugged hills of the western frontier, casting a golden glow on the dense forests and the winding river below. The river, swollen from the recent rains, roared and churned with a power that had claimed more than one careless life. Jack McAllister, a rugged cowboy with the weathered face of a man who had seen too much, rode slowly along the bank, his horse picking its way carefully over the muddy ground. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine, wet earth, and the faint tang of smoke from distant homesteads. Jack had ridden this path countless times, checking the cattle scattered across the hills, but today something felt different, a strange tension in the air, as though the river itself were warning him of danger. He squinted at the current, adjusting his wide-brimmed hat. Then he saw it. At first, he thought it was a log caught in the rapids, but the figure struggled with unnatural strength against the watery grip. As he drew closer, he realized with a jolt that it was a woman, an enormous woman, taller and broader than any human he had ever seen, her dark hair whipping in the wind as she fought the river. Her eyes, wide with fear, met his, and for a moment, the world seemed to still. Without thinking, Jack kicked his horse into a gallop, heart hammering in his chest. The river's edge was treacherous, but he didn't hesitate. He dismounted, letting the reins hang loose as he ran to a sturdy branch partially submerged near the bank.
"Grab it! Grab it!"
he shouted, waving the branch. The woman stretched her long arms toward him, water streaming down her earth-toned dress and patterned shawl. She struggled with the current, her strength impressive but no match for the river's fury. Jack anchored his boots in the mud, bracing himself against the force of the water, and thrust the branch toward her. Her fingers closed around it, and he leaned back, pulling with all his might. The river tugged at both of them, threatening to pull Jack in as well, but he gritted his teeth and held firm. Inch by inch, he hauled her to the bank. Finally, with one last heave, he dragged her onto solid ground. Both gasped for breath. Jack's lungs burned, and the woman, soaked and trembling, sank to her knees, water dripping from her long hair. "Are you all right?" Jack asked, panting. She nodded faintly, her dark eyes scanning him warily. She spoke a few words in a language he didn't understand, her voice soft but commanding. Jack frowned, catching fragments, and realized she was trying to tell him her name. Ahuli, he guessed, and she gave a small approving nod. Despite her massive size, there was a delicate grace in her movements. He noticed the intricate beadwork on her dress and the feathers in her hair, symbols of her tribe and status. She was not an ordinary traveler. She was someone important, someone the river could not claim without consequence. Jack helped her stand and guided her to his horse, offering a blanket. Her hands were enormous, but the gentleness in her touch surprised him. She wrapped herself in the dry fabric, shivering, her eyes occasionally darting back to the river as though fearing it might try to pull her away again. Jack climbed back onto his horse, keeping her steady as they rode toward his cabin, nestled in the trees. A simple wooden structure with smoke curling from the chimney, firewood stacked neatly outside, and a small garden of vegetables thriving despite the harsh soil. Once inside, Jack helped her sit near the hearth, pulling off her soaked shoes and rubbing her hands to restore warmth. He fetched dry clothes, though they were too small for her, and instead wrapped her in blankets. "You'll be safe here," he said quietly. Ahuli's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his arm lightly, a gesture of gratitude and trust. Jack felt a strange warmth in his chest, a stir of something long forgotten. Connection. The morning passed slowly as Jack tended to her bruises and hypothermia. He brought her bowls of warm broth and bread, watching as she delicately handled the food despite her enormous size. She spoke little English, but her expressive gestures conveyed stories of the river, of being swept away by a sudden storm while crossing near her village, and of her family's worry. Jack listened intently, fascinated by her resilience and the calm authority she carried even in a moment of weakness. By midday, Ahuli had regained enough strength to sit upright. Wrapping herself in blankets and observing her surroundings, Jack noticed the way she examined his cabin with keen eyes, respecting his space yet curious about everything. They did not speak much. The quiet moments were enough. Jack could sense her pride, her intelligence, and the unspoken strength that made her a figure of legend even in his mind. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting long shadows across the clearing, a distant rumble of hooves reached Jack's ears. He squinted, alarmed. Within minutes, a group of Apache warriors emerged from the tree line, their expressions serious but not hostile. Leading them was a man whose presence commanded respect, an elder with weathered skin, piercing eyes, and an aura of authority, Chief Waya, Ahuli's father. Jack's hand instinctively rested on the rifle across his lap, yet he sensed no immediate threat. The chief dismounted, observing Jack and Ahuli carefully. "You saved her life," he said slowly in English, his voice deep and steady. "For this I owe you honor." He gestured to the warriors, who remained a respectful distance away. Then, Chief Waya revealed the unexpected reward. A finely crafted bow inlaid with turquoise, passed down through generations of the Apache, said to carry not only skill in hunting but respect and protection for the wielder. Jack was taken aback. Gold, silver, or trinkets could never compare to this, a gift laden with meaning, tradition, and trust. Chief Waya continued, explaining that the bow was a symbol of their gratitude, not just for saving Ahuli, but for treating her with care, dignity, and respect. "You have shown courage and honor," the chief said, eyes locking on Jack's. "That is worth more than any coin." Ahuli moved closer to her father, her massive frame dwarfing him slightly, and whispered something in her native tongue. The chief nodded, then turned back to Jack. "This bond is not easily forged. If you accept the bow, you accept our trust." Jack felt the weight of the moment. Accepting the gift was more than gratitude. It was a bridge between two worlds, a rare connection across culture and language. Over the following hours, Jack and Chief Waya exchanged stories. Jack spoke of his life as a rancher, his solitude, and the hardships he had endured. Chief Waya recounted tales of his people, the Apache's struggles, their triumphs, their sacred traditions, and the importance of family and honor. Ahuli sat nearby, occasionally interjecting in gestures or words, her eyes gleaming with quiet amusement at the stories and jokes they shared. Through their conversations, Jack realized that bravery was not merely physical. True courage, he saw, lay in openness, trust, and respect, qualities that the chief and his daughter exemplified. Ahuli's gratitude had been a spark, but the bond formed in these hours had become something deeper, something that spoke to Jack's long-buried longing for connection. By nightfall, the Apache warriors departed, leaving Jack, Ahuli, and Chief Waya on the porch of the cabin. The bow rested in Jack's hands, its turquoise inlays gleaming softly in the firelight. He looked at Ahuli, then at her father, feeling a profound respect and responsibility. He had rescued her from the river, but in doing so, he had been drawn into a world he had never known, a world of honor, strength, and trust. As he watched the last of the warriors disappear into the shadows, Jack felt a quiet excitement for the future. His life, once defined by solitude and routine, had taken a sudden turn. Adventure, friendship, and perhaps even love awaited him, all beginning with a river rescue that neither he nor Ahuli would ever forget. The morning sun barely pierced the dense mist hanging over the river as Jack McAllister rode along the muddy bank. The river was higher than usual, swollen with rain from the previous nights, its current swift and dangerous. Jack's boots dug into the soft soil, and his horse shifted nervously. The quiet of the wilderness was deceptive. He had learned long ago that danger often hid in stillness. Then he saw her, a towering figure struggling in the rapids. She was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with dark, flowing hair plastered against her head by the river's icy grip. Her earth-toned dress clung to her like a second skin, and her patterned shawl twisted around her arms. Jack's stomach tightened. Without hesitation, he kicked his horse into motion and raced toward the edge. He grabbed a nearby fallen tree branch, wading into the shallow current as the woman flailed against the torrent. "Hold on, grab my hand," he shouted, his voice almost drowned by the roaring water. Her eyes, wide with panic and exhaustion, met his. She reached for him, and he felt the astonishing weight of her body as he wrapped his hands around hers. The river pulled at them both, threatening to sweep Jack off his feet. He dug his boots deeper into the mud and braced himself, straining every muscle as he pulled her toward the bank. Inch by inch, they battled the relentless current until finally, with a triumphant grunt, Jack dragged her onto solid ground. Both collapsed, panting, dripping wet, the river continuing its furious journey past them. The woman, Ahuli, as he soon learned, shivered violently, her large hands trembling as she tried to catch her breath. "Ahuli," he said gently, guessing the name she whispered. She nodded, her dark eyes glowing with gratitude and cautious curiosity. Jack noticed the beads on her dress glinting in the weak sunlight, and the feathers woven into her hair. This was no ordinary traveler. She was someone of importance, perhaps even a member of a prominent Apache family. By the time they reached Jack's cabin, nestled in the edge of the forest, Ahuli was too exhausted to speak. Jack stripped off her wet shawl, wrapped her in blankets, and tended to her scrapes and bruises. Despite her towering size, she moved with a grace that was almost mesmerizing. Jack brought her warm soup and dry clothing, though nothing he had would fit her large frame. She accepted the food quietly, her eyes flicking around the cabin with curiosity, her gaze lingering on the small hearth and the rough wooden furniture. For hours, they sat together in silence. Jack watched her carefully, noting the quiet dignity with which she carried herself. Her hands were massive but delicate, the long fingers weaving absent-mindedly through the blankets. She gestured with her hands, pointing to the river and then to herself, telling the story of the storm, the sudden current, and her struggle to stay afloat. Jack listened, impressed by her courage and the fierce intelligence in her eyes. As evening descended, the distant echo of hooves reached Jack's ears. His instincts tightened. Bandits, he feared. This was a lawless land, and travelers, especially someone as large and unique as Ahuli, could attract trouble. He stepped outside, scanning the trees, and saw a small group of men approaching, dirty, armed, and clearly looking for trouble. "Stay inside," he said to Ahuli, his voice firm. "I'll handle this." The bandits arrived at the cabin, dismounting roughly. One sneered, "That's a fine piece of meat you've got there, cowboy. Hand her over and maybe we'll let you live." Jack's hand rested on his rifle, his eyes narrowing. He knew he could not let them harm Ahuli. She might be massive, but the river had left her weakened. Ahuli, sensing the danger, stepped forward, her towering frame suddenly imposing. The bandits froze, realizing too late that they underestimated her. With a single movement, she grabbed a nearby log, swinging it with incredible force and knocking the first man off his feet. The others hesitated, fear flashing in their eyes. Jack seized the moment, firing warning shots into the air. The bandits scattered into the trees, leaving their wounded companion behind. Ahuli turned to Jack, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Strong," she said simply, nodding in approval. Jack chuckled, impressed by her bravery. "And you're just getting started," he replied. The next morning, just as Jack was finishing his chores, a group of Apache warriors appeared on the ridge above the cabin. Leading them was Chief Waya, Ahuli's father, a figure of authority and dignity. Jack's hand instinctively went to his rifle, but the chief raised a hand in peace. "You saved her from the river," Chief Waya said slowly, "and from bandits. For this, our gratitude is yours." He stepped forward, carrying a gift wrapped in animal hide. Jack took it cautiously. Inside was a beautiful ancient bow inlaid with turquoise, the craftsmanship exquisite. "This bow is ours," the chief explained. "It carries respect, protection, and honor. You may keep it, for you have earned it." Jack was stunned. He had expected perhaps coins or supplies, but this was more, a symbol of trust, of acceptance into a world he had never known. He looked at Ahuli, who nodded solemnly, her large hand resting briefly on his arm in silent thanks. Chief Waya continued, his eyes piercing. "Not all would protect her. You have shown courage, strength, and heart. That is worth more than gold." Over the next hours, Jack and Chief Waya spoke of the land, of survival, and of honor. Ahuli watched, listening, occasionally translating or adding her thoughts in gestures. Jack learned of Apache traditions, their respect for nature, and the importance of family and community. He realized that saving Ahuli had not only spared her life, but had also forged a bond of trust and respect between him and her people. As the sun dipped behind the hills, the Apache warriors left, the forest reclaiming its quiet. Jack held the bow, running his fingers over the inlaid turquoise, feeling the weight of history and trust. Ahuli stood beside him, towering and imposing yet gentle, and he understood something important. This encounter had changed him. The frontier had always been about survival, but now it was also about connection, honor, and courage in ways he had never imagined. The night settled softly over the cabin. Fireflies glimmered in the surrounding trees, the river's roar a distant lullaby. Jack glanced at Ahuli, her eyes reflecting the flickering firelight, and felt a rare warmth in his chest. The world was dangerous, unpredictable, and vast, But in her presence and in the bond they had forged, it suddenly seemed a little less lonely for Jack. The river had not only delivered danger and a test of strength, but had also brought a giant woman of courage and dignity, a father who understood honor, and a chance to step beyond the solitary life he had known. And for Ahuli, the river had been a trial, a brush with death, and a moment that revealed both the kindness and bravery of the man who would become her protector. The frontier stretched endlessly before them, full of possibilities, dangers, and the promise of adventures yet to come. Jack knew one thing for certain. Whatever lay ahead, he and Ahuli would face it together, with courage, strength, and the unexpected bonds forged in the swirling currents of the river. The wind carried a crisp chill through the tall pines as Jack McAllister rode toward the river again. The morning mist clung to his worn leather coat and the brim of his hat, damp with dew. He had been restless all night, the events of the past 2 days replaying in his mind. The rescue of the giant Apache woman, Ahuli, the narrow escape from bandits, and the solemn visit from Chief Waya with the intricately inlaid bow. Something tugged at his conscience, urging him to understand more, to see beyond the surface of the acts of bravery and the symbols of trust. When he reached the clearing near the river, Ahuli was already there. The massive woman knelt by the water, her long fingers tracing patterns in the flowing current. Her earth-toned dress and patterned shawl were damp with dew, but she moved with a grace that made her enormous frame appear light and fluid. Her dark eyes lifted as he approached, a small smile playing at her lips. "Jack," she said softly in English, the first time she had spoken his name clearly. "Morning," he replied, dismounting and leading his horse to the bank. "You seem at peace." Ahuli nodded, gazing at the river's current. "The river tests strength," she said, her voice low and steady. "It is honest. It takes only what is weak. You are strong." Jack frowned slightly, brushing mud from his boots. "I did what anyone would do." He tried to dismiss the compliment, but the warmth in her gaze made it hard to ignore. That morning, Jack noticed something in the distance, a group of men moving along the ridge above the river. Their pace was measured, deliberate. Jack's instincts told him they were no ordinary travelers. He dismounted and silently drew his rifle. Ahuli, sensing his tension, stood beside him. Despite her towering size, she moved silently like a shadow. "Trouble?" she asked in her careful English. "Possibly," Jack replied. "Stay behind me." The men on the ridge were scouts from a nearby ranch, but they were notorious for pressuring local tribes for land and resources. Jack knew that the Apache had long endured such threats, and that Chief Waya's people would respond fiercely if provoked. He realized that his next actions could either deepen the trust he had built with Ahuli and her father, or undo it entirely. This was the moral dilemma he had not expected when he saved her from the river. Jack decided to ride toward the approaching men, Ahuli at his side. Their combined presence was imposing. Jack, weathered and determined, and Ahuli, a massive figure of calm authority and strength. As they drew closer, the men raised their hands, expecting intimidation, but Jack's steady voice cut through the tension. "This land is watched and respected," he said. "Your presence here is not welcome unless you mean no harm," one of the men sneered. "We don't answer to a cowboy or some wild tribe. Move aside." Jack felt the familiar surge of anger but tempered it with caution. He glanced at Ahuli. Her eyes were calm, almost meditative. She stepped forward, her immense height and quiet confidence making the men falter. She spoke in her language, words flowing like music, commanding and precise. Jack had learned enough to catch the meaning. "Leave now. Respect our land." The men hesitated, uncertain, sensing the silent authority radiating from her. Then one muttered a curse and they slowly retreated. Jack exhaled sharply, relief flooding him. Ahuli turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Strength is not only in arms," she said. "It is in mind and respect." Jack nodded, understanding her lesson. Courage was not always measured in gunfire. Sometimes it lay in restraint and wisdom. That afternoon, Chief Waya arrived once more. This time there was no ceremonial bow. Instead, he brought stories, songs, and teachings. He wanted Jack to understand not only the Apache culture, but the moral framework that guided their people. Jack listened, enthralled, as the chief spoke of balance, respect for the land, and the weight of decisions that affected not only oneself, but the entire community. Ahuli assisted in translation, her voice steady, her demeanor commanding yet gentle. Jack watched her, fascinated by her combination of strength, intelligence, and humility. Her presence was overwhelming yet comforting, as if she embodied both power and serenity simultaneously. At one point, Chief Waya posed a question to Jack. If harm comes to her while she is in your care, will you protect her even at cost to yourself? Jack's answer was instinctive. Always. I will do everything in my power to keep her safe. The chief studied him, eyes narrowing. Words are easy. Actions define a man. You have shown courage. But there will be moments when the right path is not the easiest. You must choose wisely. Jack understood immediately. The moral test had begun. It was no longer about saving a huli from a river or defending her from outsiders. It was about navigating the treacherous terrain of alliances, respect, and cultural responsibility. In the days that followed, Jack immersed himself in Apache ways. He learned how Ahuli's people hunted, gathered, and moved through the land with an almost spiritual awareness. He observed rituals of respect for animals in the river, and the care given to each action, no matter how small. Ahuli taught him to track quietly, to observe rather than act rashly, and to understand that strength without wisdom could be destructive. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant mountains, Jack and Ahuli sat near the river. The golden light reflected in the water, illuminating her immense frame in a soft glow. She spoke of her childhood, of growing taller than her peers, of learning to respect the river's power and the land's spirit. Jack listened, captivated by her words and by the way she carried herself. Despite her size, she radiated an elegance that seemed inseparable from her courage. You saved me, she said quietly, eyes on the flowing water. But you also learn. The river does not forgive foolishness, Jack nodded. And I will not forget. You've taught me more than I expected. There was a pause, and in that silence, an unspoken bond formed, built on trust, respect, and the shared understanding of what it meant to be responsible for another life. The true test came when Jack learned that a rival group of settlers planned to seize land near the river, threatening not only Ahuli but her entire tribe. He faced a choice: warn the settlers and risk the Apache's trust, or stay silent and defend the tribe if needed. The moral weight of the decision pressed on him like never before. Jack chose honor. He rode at dawn to confront the settlers, explaining the land's sacred significance and the potential consequences of aggression. Some mocked him. Others listened, impressed by his steadfastness. Meanwhile, Ahuli and her people prepared, not for violence but for a strong defensive presence, showing their readiness without provocation. In the end, the settlers withdrew, intimidated by the combined presence of Jack and the Apache warriors, and the unwavering authority of Chief Waya. The river had tested him, the land had tested him, and his choices had proven his honor. That evening, Chief Waya presented Jack with a token of respect, a ceremonial sash, richly decorated, symbolizing the trust and bond between them. Ahuli stood beside her father, her immense form casting a long shadow in the firelight. She touched Jack's arm lightly, a gesture that spoke more than words could. Jack understood now that the river rescue had been only the beginning. Through action, patience, and moral courage, he had earned a place of respect in their eyes, not as an outsider, but as a man of honor. And in Ahuli he had found not only gratitude and trust, but a formidable ally, companion, and perhaps in time something even deeper. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying the river's constant murmur. Jack gazed at the horizon, knowing that life on the frontier would always hold dangers, choices, and tests of character. But he also knew that with Ahuli by his side and the trust of Chief Waya, he could face whatever challenges came next. Together, they had weathered the river, the threats, and the moral trials. Together, they would navigate the untamed land, the unknown future, and the unexpected adventures waiting beyond the next bend in the river. The morning fog clung to the edges of the forest, drifting lazily over the river that had changed Jack McAllister's life 2 days prior. He rode with his horse's hooves crunching the frost-laden soil, the cold air stinging his face and his thoughts circling the events that had unfolded since rescuing Ahuli from the raging river. The memory of her enormous, drenched frame struggling against the current still burned vividly in his mind. As he approached his cabin, he saw Ahuli standing outside, her massive figure framed against the golden morning light. Her long, dark hair swayed with the breeze, the patterned shawl draped gracefully over her broad shoulders. She held a small bundle of firewood, her posture both proud and relaxed. Despite her size, there was elegance in her every movement, a calm authority that seemed almost otherworldly. "Good morning," Jack called, dismounting. "Morning," Ahuli replied, her deep voice calm yet warm. "The river speaks today." Jack raised an eyebrow. "And what is it saying?" Ahuli's eyes glimmered. "Challenges. Not from outsiders, but from within." Jack's curiosity sharpened. He knew the Apache respected their customs and traditions deeply. Any disturbance within the tribe could carry as much danger as any bandit attack. He followed Ahuli as she led him along the riverbank, past the familiar trees and rocks to a clearing where a group of her people had gathered. At the center stood two men arguing, their voices raised, anger etched into every gesture. Ahuli's father, Chief Waya, stood nearby, arms folded, his expression grave. Jack immediately recognized that the tension was serious. He had expected gratitude and calm after saving Ahuli, but this was something far more intricate. "These men are elders?" Jack asked quietly. Ahuli nodded. "Yes, but today, one challenges the other's decision. It concerns my place in the tribe, and whether my actions require accountability." Jack frowned, unsure how to intervene. Chief Waya noticed him and gave a slight nod, silently granting him permission to stay but not speak. Jack understood. This was a test of diplomacy and respect, not of force. The argument escalated. One elder claimed that Ahuli's survival and her interaction with an outsider, Jack, were transgressions against tradition. Others, including Chief Waya, defended her, emphasizing her courage and the inevitability of human aid in the face of nature's fury. Ahuli remained silent for much of the debate, her immense frame radiating calm, her hands clasped together. Jack observed her, noticing the tension in her shoulders despite her composure. Finally, Chief Waya spoke. She acted with honor. She survived, and she was assisted by one who showed courage and respect. That is the measure of strength. The dissenting elder's eyes narrowed. And yet an outsider was allowed into our sacred space. How can we ensure the balance of our people? Jack felt the weight of responsibility. He knew that his presence, however well-intentioned, had upset a delicate equilibrium. Yet he also understood that Chief Waya valued honor and bravery above rigid isolation. He approached carefully, bowing slightly in respect. "I mean no disrespect," he said slowly. "I came only to help her. My actions were guided by the river, by her safety, and by respect for your people." Ahuli's eyes softened as she turned to him, grateful for his support. "You speak truth," she said. "The river, the land, and the people are witnesses." The council deliberated further. Jack watched as the elders debated, the tension thick in the crisp morning air. Ahuli finally stepped forward, her voice resonant and commanding. "I am of the tribe. I survived. My choice was to live, and my gratitude is given not only to one man, but to all who respect the land and its spirit. Let my actions be the lesson, not the punishment." Her words silenced the gathering. Even the dissenting elder paused, his expression softening. The power in her voice, combined with her sheer presence, conveyed strength and wisdom beyond what Jack could have imagined. He realized that her size was not merely physical. It was the embodiment of authority, courage, and moral clarity. Chief Waya nodded slowly, pride evident in his eyes. "She speaks with the river's wisdom," he said. "Let this challenge end here. The tribe's respect is earned through action, courage, and honesty, all of which she has shown." That evening, Jack and Ahuli sat near the riverbank, the sun setting in hues of orange and purple across the sky. The day's tension had faded, replaced by a quiet intimacy between them. The river's gentle roar provided a soothing background, a reminder of the forces that had brought them together. "You handled them well," Jack said quietly. "I didn't know what to do when they started arguing." Ahuli looked at him, her dark eyes calm and knowing. "You were part of the lesson, not just to me, but to them. Courage is not only in action. Sometimes it is in restraint, in speaking truth calmly and allowing balance to prevail." Jack nodded, understanding more than he had before. Each interaction, each choice carried weight. Saving Ahuli from the river had been simple compared to navigating the complexities of human respect, trust, and tradition. The following days brought new challenges. Jack helped Ahuli's people fortify parts of the village against potential threats from rival settlers. He learned their hunting techniques, their strategies for sustainable living, and their ceremonies honoring the land. He observed rituals that demanded reverence for every action, every movement, every word spoken. Ahuli guided him through these practices, her patient explanations revealing the depth of her knowledge and her role as a leader within the tribe. One night, as a chill swept across the river, Ahuli invited Jack to sit beside her near the fire. The orange flames reflected off her dark hair, and the patterned shawl draped perfectly over her enormous shoulders. She spoke softly, recounting the moment she was swept into the river, the terror and cold she felt, and the unexpected strength she found within herself. "You saved me," she said, her massive hands gesturing to the space between them. "But the river also showed me what is important: courage, wisdom, and trust. You have all three." Jack felt a lump in his throat. "And you've taught me more than I ever expected," he replied. "Not just about bravery, but about life, honor, and connection." Her eyes softened. "The river does not forgive mistakes, but it rewards understanding." Days later, news arrived of outsiders encroaching on the riverbank upstream. Jack, Ahuli, and a group of warriors rode to confront them. The encounter was tense, but this time Jack and Ahuli approached, not as mere savior and rescued, but as partners, equal participants in defending the land and upholding honor. Ahuli's massive presence and her commanding voice quelled the tension before a single arrow was loosed. Jack handled negotiations with measured words, appealing to reason and respect. The outsiders left peacefully, impressed and intimidated by the pair's combined authority. By nightfall, Chief Waya arrived, a solemn expression on his face. He presented Jack with another symbol of trust: a finely crafted shield inlaid with turquoise and feathers, representing not only the protection of Ahuli, but the bond between their people. Jack accepted it humbly, realizing that the gift carried deeper significance than any physical reward. Ahuli stood beside her father, her hand resting lightly on Jack's arm, a silent gesture of gratitude, trust, and connection. Jack looked at her, awed by her enormity, her strength, and the wisdom she wielded as effortlessly as the river flowed. As the fire crackled, the river reflecting the starlit sky, Jack knew that the events of the past week had changed him irrevocably. He had learned courage, yes, but more importantly, he had learned respect, humility, and the weight of honor. Ahuli had not only survived the river, she had navigated the complexities of her tribe, strengthened her authority, and welcomed Jack into her world as an equal. The frontier stretched endlessly beyond the trees, full of uncertainty, danger, and promise. Jack and Ahuli, bound by the river by courage and by mutual respect, would face whatever came next, together unyielding, and guided by the lessons the river had taught them. The night settled softly over the cabin and the village beyond. The river murmured its timeless song, a reminder of both peril and reward, and for Jack McAllister and Ahuli, the river had delivered not just a rescue, but a profound journey into trust, honor, and partnership, a bond that would shape their future and the untamed land around them. The sun rose slowly over the western hills, casting its golden glow across the river that had become the stage of Jack McAllister's greatest adventure. The morning mist clung to the trees, the cool air carrying the scent of pine, damp earth, and river water. Jack rode along the familiar path, the rhythm of his horse's hooves steady beneath him. The events of the past days, the river rescue, the bandit threat, and the tribal challenges had left their mark. He had grown accustomed to the sense of tension and wonder that seemed to follow Ahuli, the enormous Apache woman whose very presence seemed to command the wilderness around them. As he approached the clearing near his cabin, Ahuli was already there. Her earth-toned dress and patterned shawl flowed gracefully with her massive frame, her long dark hair glinting in the soft sunlight. She was gathering firewood with careful, deliberate movements, each gesture reflecting strength, elegance, and a quiet command of her environment. Jack dismounted, observing her silently for a moment, marveling at how effortlessly she balanced power with grace. "Good morning, Jack," she said softly, her voice low but steady. "The river has brought news." Jack raised an eyebrow, curiosity stirring. "News from the river?" he asked, a hint of a smile tugging at his lips. Ahuli nodded, her massive hand gesturing toward the forest. "Not the river alone. The land speaks. My father approaches with something important." Jack followed her gaze and saw a group of Apache warriors emerging from the trees. Leading them was Chief Waya, his presence imposing yet calm, eyes sharp and assessing. Jack's hand instinctively rested on the rifle across his lap, though he knew this was not a moment for force. This was a moment of trust, recognition, and perhaps reward for the courage and integrity he had shown. Chief Waya approached slowly, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft animal hide. His expression was solemn, the weight of his tribe's traditions evident in the careful steps he took. Ahuli stepped beside Jack, her towering frame offering silent support and confidence. "You have shown honor," Chief Waya said, his voice deep and measured. "You have risked life for another, defended our people, and acted with wisdom beyond that of many men. For this we offer a reward, not gold nor simple trinkets, but something of meaning." He handed the bundle to Jack. The cowboy's hands, roughened by years of labor, trembled slightly as he untied the hide and revealed the contents. A beautiful ceremonial bow, intricately inlaid with turquoise and decorated with feathers and carvings that spoke of generations of Apache warriors. Jack's eyes widened. The bow was not only a weapon, it was a symbol of trust, respect, and recognition, a rare honor bestowed only on those deemed worthy by the tribe. "This bow is yours," Chief Waya continued. "It carries not only protection, but the acknowledgement of courage, loyalty, and respect. Use it wisely." Jack accepted the gift with humility, bowing his head slightly. "I will," he said, feeling the weight of both the bow and the responsibility it represented. Ahuli stepped closer, her massive hand brushing lightly against his arm. "You have earned this," she said simply, her eyes reflecting pride and warmth. "But it is not only the bow that is given. You have our trust, and that is the greatest reward." Over the next hours, Jack learned more about the significance of the gift. Chief Waya explained that the bow was passed down through generations, given only to those who had proven themselves through courage, respect, and service to others. Jack listened intently, realizing that this moment marked a culmination of everything he had experienced with Ahuli: the river rescue, the bandit threat, the tribal challenges, and the countless small lessons of honor and restraint. Ahuli guided him in handling the bow, showing him the proper stance, the draw, and the care required to maintain it. Despite her enormous size, her movements were precise, deliberate, and graceful. Jack followed her instructions, feeling a connection not only to the weapon, but to the trust and traditions it represented. "You are learning quickly," Ahuli said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "But remember, the bow is more than a tool. It is a responsibility. Your actions reflect on those who gave it to you." Jack nodded solemnly. "I understand, and I will honor it." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack and Ahuli sat near the river, the sky ablaze with hues of orange and purple. The water shimmered like molten gold, reflecting the firelight from a small campfire they had built. The quiet hum of the forest and the gentle roar of the river provided a serene backdrop for reflection. "You have changed much in these days," Ahuli said, her massive frame leaning slightly forward, not just in action but in thought. "You see the world differently now," Jack smiled faintly, gazing into the fire. "I've learned that courage is not just in facing danger. It's in understanding, in patience, in doing what is right even when it is hard." Ahuli's eyes glimmered. "The river taught me the same. It tests strength, but it also teaches wisdom. We survive not only by fighting, but by knowing when to act and when to listen." Jack reached out, resting his hand lightly on hers. Despite the contrast in size, the gesture felt balanced, a silent acknowledgement of trust, respect, and growing connection. "I will remember that," he said. In the following days, Jack's presence with the tribe deepened. He assisted in practical ways, helping build protective structures, teaching defensive strategies, and learning the rhythms of hunting and tracking from Ahuli. But more importantly, he learned the subtle lessons, the value of restraint, the importance of listening, and the weight of decisions that affected not just himself, but others. Ahuli became more than a companion. She was a teacher, a guide, and a bridge to a world Jack had never known. Her immense size and strength were matched only by her wisdom and integrity. Together they moved through the village and the surrounding wilderness with a sense of partnership and respect, earning the admiration of the tribe. One morning, news arrived of a threat from settlers attempting to encroach further upstream. Jack, bow in hand, rode with Ahuli and a group of warriors to confront them. The encounter was tense, but this time Jack felt a calm confidence. The ceremonial bow, a symbol of trust and honor, rested in his hands, reminding him of the lessons he had learned. Ahuli's presence was commanding. Her voice, deep and resonant, carried authority that silenced the settlers' bravado. Jack spoke with measured words, appealing to reason, respect, and the understanding of consequences. The settlers, recognizing the strength and cohesion of the pair, withdrew without violence. Chief Waya later commended Jack, emphasizing that his actions reflected not only courage, but honor. The reward, the bow, was more than a weapon. It was a testament to Jack's growth, his moral fortitude, and his place within their world. That evening, the tribe celebrated quietly. Firelight danced across the faces of men, women, and children, illuminating their pride and gratitude. Jack stood beside Ahuli, feeling the weight of the journey he had undertaken. From the river's edge to this moment of trust and recognition, Ahuli placed a massive hand on his shoulder. "The river brought us together," she said softly, "but it is our choices that define what comes next." Jack looked at her, awe and admiration in his gaze. "And I choose to honor you, your people, and the lessons I've learned, always." The night settled over the river and the forest, stars reflected in the flowing water. Jack knew that the bow in his hands was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of connection, trust, and the enduring bond forged through courage, wisdom, and respect. For Jack McAllister, the river rescue had been the beginning of a journey that would shape not only his life, but the lives of those he had come to respect and care for. And for Ahuli, the giant Apache woman, the river had brought a man worthy of trust, a companion in strength and a bridge between two worlds. Together, they faced the wilderness, its dangers, its beauty, and its challenges, and together, they would continue to honor the river, the land, and the bonds of courage and respect that had brought them together.